There's a shift happening right now that most people can't see, and maybe that's what makes it so powerful. It's not on the evening news, it's not being debated by politicians, and it's not something you'll see trending on social media. It's happening in silence, in the small decisions men are making every day when they finally step back and say, enough. More and more men are walking away from women, not in bitterness, not in hate, but in clarity. They're realizing that the cost of playing by society's rules has become too high, and the return is too low. For years, men were told that if they just worked harder, gave more, and sacrificed more, they would eventually earn loyalty, appreciation, and lasting respect. But what they've seen instead is the opposite. The more they gave, the less they were valued. The more they sacrificed, the more invisible they became. It's not a sudden decision. It builds quietly, after years of doing the right things only to find themselves drained, unappreciated, and often discarded when they're no longer convenient. The realization hits like a slow dawn, not like lightning. It's the moment when a man looks at the years he spent trying to prove himself and sees that it was never enough because the system itself is flawed. He realizes the issue isn't his lack of effort, but that his effort has been directed into something designed to consume him. That's when clarity arrives. That's when he stops chasing validation and begins reclaiming his energy. And once a man steps into that clarity, he doesn't shout about it, he doesn't protest. He simply begins to walk a different path, one where his worth is no longer measured by how much he can give away, but by how much he chooses to preserve for himself. For decades, men have been raised under an unspoken script that tells them their value rests almost entirely on their ability to attract and keep a woman. From the earliest movies they watched to the songs they listened to on the radio, from the ads plastered across billboards to the casual advice handed down by family and friends, the same message was repeated over and over: your purpose as a man is fulfilled only when you win approval from women. If you don't have her attention, if you don't have her validation, then you're lacking. That conditioning sinks deep, shaping the way men view themselves and their place in the world. The problem is, this script no longer matches reality. Modern dating isn't built on the values it once claimed to hold: loyalty, family, mutual growth. Instead, it has become a revolving door built on leverage, validation, and the constant pursuit of options. The landscape has shifted into something transactional, where stability is fragile and respect is negotiable. Men are told to prove themselves endlessly, but they've watched how quickly love can turn into entitlement and loyalty into convenience. They've seen commitment treated like a temporary arrangement rather than a foundation. Once a man sees the truth of this system, he realizes it was never designed to reward his sacrifices. He notices that no matter how much effort he gives, he remains one decision away from being replaced. This clarity is jarring, but freeing. Because once he sees that the game has been rigged from the start, the illusion fades. And in that moment, something inside him shifts. He stops pouring energy into a system that drains him. He stops playing. And instead of chasing validation, he begins choosing himself. When men decide to walk away, it doesn't happen with fireworks or noise. There are no speeches, no angry declarations, no desperate last attempts to make someone understand. It's quiet, almost invisible at first. A man simply starts to withdraw the energy he used to pour into others. The calls and texts that once came regularly begin to fade. The efforts to prove his worth, to chase after attention or affection, stop. He no longer rearranges his life to fit someone else's schedule, no longer bends his standards in order to keep the peace, and no longer sacrifices his values just to hold on to someone who never truly valued him. Instead, he redirects all that energy inward. The money he used to spend chasing dates is invested in his own growth. The time he used to waste in arguments is spent building new skills, traveling, or focusing on fitness. He starts crafting a life that feels full on its own, one that doesn't rely on constant romantic validation to feel meaningful. And in that silence, something remarkable happens. The man grows stronger, calmer, and more complete. Ironically, this is often the point when he becomes more attractive than ever. Without even trying, his independence, focus, and quiet confidence draw more attention than all the chasing ever did. But here's the twist: by the time women notice, by the time they realize the gravity of his absence, he no longer needs what they're offering. He's discovered something far more valuable than attention. He's discovered self-sufficiency. And that quiet exit, the decision to stop playing a game that never rewarded him, becomes his most powerful statement. He doesn't need to explain himself. His silence says everything. What's happening isn't just a personal decision made by a few men, it's part of a larger cultural awakening. For years, the patterns were there, but they went unnoticed because men were too focused on doing what they thought was expected of them. They were told to keep giving, keep providing, keep proving their worth, and in return, they believed they'd eventually earn respect, stability, and lasting companionship. But as the years passed, men started noticing how the rules of the game were changing. Social media reshaped how people view relationships, turning them into public performances instead of private bonds. Attention from strangers often became more valuable than intimacy with a committed partner. Dating began to resemble an endless carousel, where loyalty was optional and commitment lasted only until a better option appeared. Men also began to notice how the roles they once held with pride were now dismissed as obligations. The protector, the provider, the stabilizer, all things that once earned deep respect, started to feel invisible, treated as basic requirements rather than gifts. And when something is seen as expected, it stops being appreciated. This shift left men questioning why they should continue working so hard when their contributions seemed to vanish into the background without acknowledgement. That question was the turning point. Because once a man realizes that the effort he gives is being taken for granted, he begins to pull back. He no longer sees the point in sacrificing his time and energy for people who don't notice what he's doing until it's gone. This is why men are walking away, not because they've lost the will to give, but because they refuse to keep giving into a system that treats their value as invisible until it disappears. One of the deeper reasons men are walking away is the way intimacy itself has been twisted and weaponized. Too many men have learned the hard truth that affection and respect are no longer unconditional. They've experienced how quickly admiration can shift into cold indifference the moment she doesn't get what she wants. What once felt like love slowly transforms into a bargaining tool. Affection becomes a reward only granted when he complies. Respect turns into something he must constantly earn by jumping through new hoops. And worse, the relationship becomes filled with endless tests, arguments created out of nothing, silent treatments stretched over days, sudden withdrawals of warmth and connection. Not because the bond is truly broken, but because she knows he'll scramble to win her back. This cycle of push and pull leaves a man emotionally drained, questioning his own stability. After a while, he starts to realize the problem isn't him, it's the manipulation itself. And when that clarity sets in, he doesn't just walk away from her. He walks away from the entire system that allowed it. Financial independence has only fueled this shift further. Men today can fund their own lifestyles, travel where they want, and pursue their passions without needing permission or approval. They no longer need a relationship to access those things. And with that freedom, many men see no reason to invest in someone who might eventually resent the very success that once attracted her. The realization is simple but powerful: he doesn't need to play this game to have a full life. Once he understands that, intimacy loses its ability to be used as a weapon against him. His peace, his focus, and his independence become stronger than any manipulation. The greatest discovery men are making isn't wealth, freedom, or even success, it's peace. For so long, they believed that happiness had to come from being in a relationship, from securing someone else's approval, from constantly proving that they were worthy of love. But once a man steps away and finds himself alone, he encounters something he hadn't truly felt in years: quiet. No arguments over nothing, no games of withdrawal and reconciliation, no unspoken resentments simmering under the surface. Just calm. At first, it can feel strange, even uncomfortable, because he's been conditioned to equate companionship with meaning. But as the days turn into weeks, the calm turns into something deeper. He realizes that peace is not emptiness, it is freedom. Alone, he can finally breathe. He can hear his own thoughts without them being interrupted by demands or complaints. He can focus fully on his ambitions without having to manage someone else's emotional storms. He starts to notice how much energy he used to waste keeping another person happy, and he recognizes how draining it truly was. In solitude, his mind sharpens, his body strengthens, and his spirit steadies. He learns that he doesn't need constant external stimulation to feel whole. And once a man truly tastes that level of inner peace, it becomes the most valuable thing in his life. He guards it like treasure, because he knows how rare it is. Suddenly, the idea of sacrificing it for someone who may bring chaos feels unthinkable. This is why men rarely look back once they've found peace. It's not that they reject love, it's that they finally understand peace is worth more than companionship with the wrong person, and they refuse to give it up again. When men reach the point of walking away, what they step into isn't rage, it's detachment. And that difference is everything. Anger can still be manipulated, pushed, provoked, and twisted until it reacts. Detachment, on the other hand, is immovable. A detached man doesn't flinch at the same games that once drained him. He doesn't feel the urge to argue, explain, or justify himself. He simply removes himself from situations that no longer serve him, and his silence carries more weight than any speech ever could. When a man becomes detached, he reclaims his power. He no longer spends his nights trying to decode mixed signals or chasing after someone who doesn't value him. He no longer accepts conditional love or respect that comes only when he performs. Instead, he grounds himself in his own standards, his own values, and his own direction. And that shift is magnetic. In a world obsessed with validation and attention, the man who needs none stands out like a flame in the dark. Ironically, this is often when women begin to chase harder than ever, drawn not by manipulation but by his rare calm strength. Yet by this stage, he is no longer swayed by beauty alone or empty promises of change. He has raised his standards to align with the value he has built within himself. The most important part is this: detachment is not coldness, and it's not bitterness. It's peace solidified into a way of life. It's the quiet confidence of knowing he can walk away at any moment without fear of loss. And that kind of strength cannot be faked. Once a man learns detachment, he becomes untouchable to the chaos that once held him hostage. What men are creating now isn't an escape from love, but a new way of living. They've stopped chasing approval and started chasing mastery of their craft, their bodies, their finances, and their inner world. For generations, men were told that their worth was defined by whether or not they were chosen, whether a woman approved of them enough to stay. But once men began to notice how fragile that approval was, how quickly loyalty could turn conditional, how easily affection could vanish, they stopped investing their identity in something so unstable. Instead, they've begun investing in things no one can take from them. They build businesses, strengthen their bodies, travel to expand their horizons, and cultivate skills that deepen their confidence. Each achievement compounds, each layer of discipline adds more stability, and with every step, they become harder to manipulate. Here's the paradox: when men no longer seek validation, their value becomes undeniable. They start drawing attention from the very people who once overlooked them. But by then, the game has changed. They aren't building to be noticed anymore. They're building because they've learned that a life designed around purpose and mastery is far more satisfying than one built around chasing temporary affection. The greatest revenge isn't moving on with someone new, it's moving on with yourself. It's waking up every day in a life that feels full, without the constant drain of emotional negotiations. And once a man learns to fill his own cup, he never again allows anyone to drink from it without giving in return. This isn't men giving up on love, it's men refusing to gamble their peace. And that choice changes the game entirely, not just for themselves, but for the culture around them.